Alright, hello everybody. Today I'm going to be going over how to play a Resto Druid in Mythic Plus. So with the Mythic Plus Invitationals coming soon, I thought I would get into pushing some high Mythic Plus keys and obviously seeing how I go with the Invitational. So I thought it might be a perfect time then to also go over the basics for Resto Druid in Mythic Plus. So the first really big thing to understand when you're playing Resto Druid is what your strengths are. So apart from all the utility, your strengths as a Resto Druid is your actual output, so your throughput. And that all comes because of how Mastery works. So Mastery will increase the healing you do to a target for each healing over time effect you have on the target. So having multiple, rejuves, cultivation, wild growth, regrowth, life blooms on a target will exponentially increase the amount of healing you're doing to that target. So in a smaller environment, Resto Druid is extremely powerful, and that's just because you're able to then make a spell that regrowth that would initially be doing 260k healing can be doing upwards of 1.5 millicast. So that's the one really important thing to understand is that when you're coming into any Mythic Plus, you want to be aware of what each pack does, and you want to set up essentially for that. And what that setup would be is then making sure you have rejuve rolling on targets that are going to take damage. When then damage comes onto those targets, you can be casting impactful spells onto those targets like wild growth and regrowth, spells that actually do a decent amount of healing quite quickly, because you'll find the actual throughput of rejuvenation is quite low in comparison to using swiftmends or regrowths or something like that. So that's the one really important thing to understand, and that is something you'll get when you play a lot. If you're coming up to healing a target, using regrowths on a target that don't have any other hots is almost worthless. You want to make sure you're applying hots to that target first, and then actually doing the bulk of your healing through regrowths. Now, as for gear, really Mastery is king. Try and get as much Mastery as possible. I usually run about 13, but anywhere between 10 and 13,000 depending on the gear set I'm wearing. One thing that is quite important is your actual health pool. Now my health pool is rather low just because I'm wearing some low item level gear. But health pool is quite significant. It can stop you from getting one shot, and as a healer your role in the group is quite critical. If you die on a boss, you cannot kill that boss, unless you've got a B-res. That boss is going to be essentially over the second you die. So playing very defensive as a healer is very key. So one thing that is very important to consider about gear is your actual health pool. You don't want to be dropping too many item levels to getting Mastery. Although Mastery is your best stat, having a really high health pool is very important. I can't stress that enough. So I generally tend to equip my highest item level gear with as much Mastery as possible. I do have some pieces just with crit haste or whatever. Having a little bit of haste is nice to be able to put out rejuves quicker. Having a little bit of crit is nice just because it's a really good throughput stat. Having and versatility as well. Just passive damage reduction is super good in Mythic Plus because you are likely to be taking a lot of damage. And the throughput, having a little bit of versatility, is quite nice as well. So just a well mix of stats, but Mastery is the pools well in front for Mythic Plus. But again, I do stress that eye level is quite important just for the stamina. So for Legendaries, I pretty much exclusively have been running the Dark Titans Advice and Pride as. So I find usually the Titan's Advice does generally between 10 to 15% on my healing. Now I usually play with a monk, so they can generally sustain quite easily in very high keys, 20s, 21s, without much healing onto them. And they can, with the stagger ability, they can, they don't have to be topped constantly. They're never going to take a hit that's just going to one-shot them. So you do get quite a lot of actual healing through these life rune blocks. I wouldn't say it's as good to use it on classes like DKs, who you might need just instantaneous heals, but the Dark Titans Advice is generally the best legendary I can suggest for Mythic Plus, just because of its tank healing is incredibly high, and it means that the target you have life bloom on is not a target you really have to worry about. Now the second legendary I pretty much use Pride as. Again, as I was saying, as a healer, if you die in a run, your run is going to be pretty much over. So having, you know, a defensive legendary like Prydaz giving you a huge shield constantly is very helpful. Prydaz does have triple stat, is over budgeted for a neck piece, so it is quite good. Other legendaries that are good are the risks. So this, in combination with taking Cenarian Wood, is a really high tank healing combination. So if you're planning on doing some lower keys, so if you're planning on speed running, say some 15s as opposed to 20s, being able to apply a Cenarian Ward, extending that Cenarian Ward by 10 seconds, flourishing that Cenarian Ward, you know, you can be doing easily upwards of 1,000,000 HPS on a tank just with applying 6 hots. So that is a really good situation. There are a couple bosses where the tank healing is really high. The one that always comes to mind is Oakheart in Dark Art Thicket. That boss I will pretty much always be equipping. You know, if I have Cenarian Ward on, I'll always chuck on the braces, always chuck out a Cenarian Ward and Swift Mend, and that you know, no tank is ever really going to die through that. So, you know, the braces are quite good situationally. And Velens can be quite nice situationally too. My one thing about Velens, I did use it pretty much exclusively for a very long time, but I have recently swapped it out for Prydaz, and that is for 2 reasons. Now, the first reason might sound kind of odd, but it's actually, as a legendary, Velens doesn't have stamina on it, so you don't get an increase of stamina. You'll see if I wear my normal Mythic Plus and my Velens, you'll see my HP drops down by 200k. That is quite significant. You know, it's almost 5% of my health pool just gone there. So, you know, that is a pretty big thing. Now, Velens, while it's situationally amazing, you can generally get by without it. I haven't really run into a situation where I've gone, damn, Velens would have been really nice here. You can do some really cool things with it, like massive frenzied regen with Velens up. You know, Medivh comes to mind, for example. If you get hit low, if you get a Flame Wreath on you from Medivh, go into bear form, chuck Velens out, frenzied regen, that Velens is going to be healing a ridiculous amount. So in niche situations, Velens is really good, but just in general, I think it just falls behind Prydaz. Personal preference of mine, as I said, I like to play pretty defensive as a healer, so I think Prydaz just pulls ahead of Velens. And then the other notable legendaries is Solar the Arc Druid. You can just get some huge wild growths out here, and this does kind of play into the 4-piece. But I did run this for a while with Velens, but I've kind of fallen out of favor with it. The other notable one is the shoulders. But the problem with the shoulders is that you want to be pretty much exclusively running 2-piece from Nighthold and then 4-piece from Tomb of Sargeras. So the shoulders kind of, while they're good, while they allow you to have really high uptime on double rejuves on everybody, and allow you to do other things like regrowth as instead of just applying rejuves all the time, just because they take up tier and just because of how strong our tier is for Mythic Plus, I would not recommend equipping the shoulders in Mythic Plus. So as for the gear wise, I might just again finish up by saying that 2-piece from Nighthold, if you can get a high item level set of them. Mine are only 905s, but 4000 mastery when you cast Wild Growth is super powerful. If you have a think about it, when you're applying Wild Growth, that is going to be when the bulk of your healing is. So obviously when you apply Wild Growth, you're applying another hot to pretty much every target in your group, and then you're increasing your mastery by 4000. So that can be quite a significant increase in your healing at a time when you actually want to be healing, because when you want to be healing, that's when you're going to be casting Wild Growths. So, you know, this proc is very good. Now the other thing is the both 2 and 4 set are really strong for Mythic Plus, so more Swiftmends are really great as an emergency heal. Swiftmend is a very powerful heal. You know, you're looking at, you know, 1.4 mil base pretty much for Swiftmends. If that crits, you know, it's a really nice instant heal. Has a relatively low cooldown with the 2-piece, and then the 4-piece, you know, I'm getting like 350k ticks on average on airflow. You know, targets stack up, you can easily be pumping out over, you know, 1.5 mil HPS, 2 mil HPS in times when you need it. So 4-piece and you know, 25% of your healing at those points is generally comes from efflorescence. So, you know, this 4-piece is definitely worth picking up and definitely worth, you know, any kind of item level drop in Mythic Plus. So that's all for gear. Now into the talents. So the talents are quite interesting. I have played around with a lot of the talents Mythic Plus. I have played with every single talent here. So there are perks to each one of them. Prosperity obviously comes, you know, in handy when you want more Swiftmans. It plays really well if you're playing solo the Arc Druid. You know, allows your Swiftmans to get increased uptime. You're going to get significantly more Swiftmans with them, just because of the fact that you get 2 charges, because they're going to be regenerating out of combat between pools when you're drinking, etc. So you're likely to go into a pack with a lot more Swiftmans. You know, you're going to get 2 to 3 more Swiftmans in that pack just because of this talent. So it can be quite nice, can be a real good lifesaver, but you have to weigh it up against abundance if you're looking at the spot healing kind of aspect. So abundance will let you cast really powerful regrowths very frequently. So you already have a 40% increased crit chance on regrowth, plus you already have 20% crit chance around. You know, most people are going to have that. So you're only looking at a maximum of 40% crit increase onto your regrowths. So the actual, you know, increase for regrowth is quite high. But you know, it's not as amazing as you might think. You know, if you have 10 rejuves out, you're not going to be getting 100% increased healing on your regrowths because it's already at base 60%. But just having the constantly increased regrowths is really quite handy, and the consistency of it is really good. So, you know, recently in some really high keys, you know, Black Colds, for example, where there's lots of spot damage coming out from those archers, taking something like Abundance is quite handy. So I tend to prefer nowadays to be playing Abundance over Prosperity if I had the choice. You know, if I'm thinking between playing the 2 of them, Abundance is my general pick. If we're coming into a dungeon where I'm concerned about tank healing, or you're going to a dungeon concerned about tank healing, you know, if there's a specific boss you're like, oh, I might not be able to heal this, Cenarian Wood is the perfect pickup. So Cenarian Wood with things like the Wrist with Flourish are really good for tank healing. You know, you'll generally find that if you're playing with a Wrist and Flourish, that Cenarian Wood will be your highest heal on a really big tank heavy healing fight. So Cenarian Wood is definitely a viable choice over Abundance if tank healing is your primary concern. And you know, just in general, you can really I would say these 2 talents are quite you know, replaceable with each other. So tier 30, Displacer Beast really is your only option, gives you a nice blink. Blinks are really good for getting over things like Sanguine, because you're not actually traveling through them, you're blinking over them. So it's quite a good spell. You don't really need Renewal when you have Frenzied Regen. You don't really need Wild Charge ever, unless you're trying to do a boat skip or something in Ivashara. Tier 45, Guardian Affinity is pretty much the only pick in high keys. You can do some nice DPS with Feral Affinities in lower keys, but Guardian Affinity is, you know, in any respectable key, you want to be taking Balance Affinity, passive damage reduction. Frenzied Regen is a lifesaver. Frenzied Regen does scale with your mastery and does scale your mastery, so you can get some crazy heals out of Frenzied Regen. You know, 1 Frenzied Regen when you take 30% of your HP is going to be able to heal your HP to full, you know, twice over. Tier 60, I generally run with Typhoon. Typhoon can be an AoE disruption, so very good in, you know, packs where you know, things might be on stun DR or whatever. It's just a way of interrupting mobs' casts without actually putting anything on DR. Can knock things out of Sanguine. Just all round, I would you know, pretty much never take Bash, never take Mass Entangle. Typhoon would always be my default pick. Tier 75, Cultivation is pretty much the default pick. The whole idea with Druid and Mythic Plus is to get more hots. Cultivation will apply another hot, increasing your mastery because you're going to be running high mastery. Cultivation gets lots of value, and generally when you're doing high keys, people are going to be dropping, you know, any hit from anything will pretty much bring someone below 60% HP, proccing Cultivation. So Cultivation gets some really nice uptime. Same thing with tier 90, Germination is your highest throughput on a, you know, when you're looking at a single target in comparison to Spring Blossoms, and you know, you don't have to be stacked up. So Germination, just again another hot. So it's the default pick. Now tier 100, really you have a choice between Flourish and Moment of Clarity. Moment of Clarity runs really well if you're taking Abundance. I would say if you're taking Abundance, Moment of Clarity is the default pick, unless there's something specifically you're looking to use Flourish on. So if there's some really high AoE damage on a specific fight, something that comes to mind would be the second boss in Quarter Stars that has the constant AoE. Flourish there can be really, really good in pumping out a lot of heals. You know, it's essentially having an extra wild growth on a 1 minute cooldown. You know, it's just situationally really, really nice if you're looking to do some stacked, you know, AoE healing where everyone's taking damage, where Flourish can save everybody. Apart from that, Moment of Clarity gives you a nice increase on regrowth, saves you some mana, just all around quite good. So my default pick would be Moment of Clarity and Abundance. If I'm taking Cenarian Ward, I would pick Flourish, and that's basically the two parallels there. So that's it for talents. When it comes down to actual healing, I will go through some gameplay and we'll go over, you know, what kind of my thought process is there. Alright, we're going to be looking at a 20 fortified, so it's not a tyrannical Desseron. So this boss will be doing a lot of actual AoE damage, and I'll go over how I prep for that damage. So the whole idea is that I want to have my airflow down. I want to have 2 rejuves on everybody. I want to be casting Wild Growth before the while the downdraft is happening, and then I want to be swift mending whoever has the lowest HP, and then buffing my airflow with that swift mend. So you'll see there I swift mend the warrior because he gets low, cast my Wild Growth out, and then the airflow healing you can see on the side of my screen there if you want to pause it how much it's doing. So it's like 200 and something K per person when it's buffed, so it's quite a large amount of healing. So you did have some ads spawn there, which was quite messy, but you know, that's pretty much it's dealable. So again, here we have rejuves on everybody. I wasn't too close to the boss here, so I actually decided to trank this one. So I used my Essence of Garnier for the first one, my Trank for the second one, and then I called out for personal cooldowns for the next one that's coming out. So you'll see how I kind of fell behind on the rejuves there, which is why I couldn't top people very quick, but that's kind of what Tranking does. So again, we're going to get prepped for the next one. So again, double rejuve on everybody. I'm going to be going through and casting rejuves on people again. I actually chucked my life bloom out there on the warrior just because I know he's going to be the squishiest target. I call for personals, that's why you see the rallying cry and my buckskin coming out. And then again, we're easily able to top through that. And then just healing up again. So the boss fight really isn't too long on Fortified, but you know, that's just how I'm rotating my cooldowns. You'll see my essences now up for the next one because they're about 30 seconds apart. So essence here. And then Wild Growth and Swift Mend. Everybody's almost full HP again as we come out of the Desseron beam. Not beam, blowback. And that's pretty much the entire boss. So that whole boss, you know, that's really one of the harder bosses to heal in Mythic Plus because you have to be prepped for that downdraft. Now while it's quite simple and quite repetitive, you know, stuffing up at any point during there can cause people to die, and that can be quite punishing. I didn't actually have my HPS up for that one, but it'd be at least like a mil on a plus 20, and that's really not what, you know, I'm not running with classes like you know, multiple rogues, for example, you just spam feint, or you know, warlocks who can just heal themselves, mages who can block, etc. So you know, warriors and hunters actually do need quite a bit of healing there. So you know, that's kind of an example of how that works. If we skip to the last boss, I'll kind of go over what we do on this, because this is also, you know, one of the harder, more interesting bosses. So you see Nightbone Bolt on me, I go into bear form, just to minimize the damage I take. So Feed on the Weak here. Warrior pops his defensive cooldown there. I just regrowth and swift mend. If he didn't have his defensive cooldown, I was going to iron bark him, but essentially my iron bark is going to be in reserve. So you know, the whole idea with this fight is that even though people are not really going to be taking any pulsing AoE damage, you want to make sure you have double rejuves on them, just so when a Feed on the Weak actually comes onto them, they can, you're going to be doing that increased healing to them. You're going to have 2-3 stacks from your rejuice and cultivation, and you can do excess healing onto them. So again, Nightmare Bolt on my hunter, precasted regrowths, 3 regrowths, and he's topped. Quite easy. The explosion's coming up here, so we're all popping defensives. I jump into bear form. You can see I'm almost full HP just from being in bear form, and I'm going to trinket. So after this, we have Nightmare Bolt going onto our rogue, cheat death procs. He should have popped a defensive cooldown there, but there's only so much you can do. So feed on the weak on the tank, lucky us. And you'll see how constantly throughout this entire fight, even though there's not really any ray damage going out, that I'm trying to keep rejuice on as many people as possible. Now obviously the warrior and the hunter are the most susceptible targets to the damage. The hunter can obviously feign death to feed on the weak, so he's not too susceptible, but he always likes to get his cast off and take a lot of damage anyway. But yeah. But that's essentially what I'm doing for this fight. It might look quite easy when I'm going over it, but if you're not prepared for these Nightmare Bolts, if you're not prepared for the things that are going to be coming, you're going to be behind, people are going to be dying to feed on the weaks, and it just kind of spirals out of control from there. You do have a lot of mana to play with on this fight. Generally the fight isn't too long, so that's pretty much it. Obviously these are fortified bosses. They don't have too much HP respectively to the level, but they are decently high keys. They do a lot of damage, and the same principles apply. So that's essentially what you want to be doing for some of the harder bosses in the game, I would say. But yeah, I hope you learned something, and thanks for watching.